Welcome to Living Fully, a podcast dedicated to enhancing your mental well-being. Each episode explores valuable insights and practical strategies to help you lead a more fulfilling life. I'm your host, Katherine Hurtig. Today's episode is a little different from our usual discussions. In our last episode, we explored the intricacies of self-esteem and its impact on our lives. And today, we're taking it a step further. We're not just talking about self-esteem, we're hearing from two people who have lived through its challenges firsthand. In this episode, we'll be joined by two Calgary Counselling Centre clients, Brad and Jessie. They'll share their personal stories discussing what they were going through, their experiences with counselling, and their time in the Building Esteem group program. We'll talk with Annemarie Rued-Fraser, a psychologist at Calgary Counselling Centre. She's going to provide expert insights into the benefits of group counseling and why it can be a powerful tool for addressing self-esteem concerns.
My name is Brad. I've lived in Calgary for about the last 25 years or so. I teach middle school and I've got a couple of daughters. They're also middle school age. I really enjoy what I do. I'm just really curious. I love learning. That's just a part of who I am and a part of what I just have chosen to do with my time and how I can, be useful in the world. And I really like it. So,
what subject do you teach?
A little bit of everything, primarily humanities, language arts, social studies, but math and science and phys ed and as well.
So, Brad, what brought you into Calgary Counselling Centre? What was going on?
I was looking for help because I came to realize that I was feeling stuck with some things that had troubled me for a long, long time. I realized patterns of thinking that had been problematic for me probably since my late teens, definitely young adulthood, and definitely into my professional life. And I was stuck. I worked really, really hard to project this image of someone who had things together because I felt like that was my responsibility as a teacher. That was my responsibility as a parent. I wanted to be a good friend and I wanted to do it all really, really well. And I found that the weight of all of this was increasingly heavy. And I knew that there were so many ways I was not doing a good job of carrying all of this. I was like the proverbial duck, I guess, where everything looks smooth on the surface. And underneath the surface, I was paddling frantically and I was stuck. And those who knew me really well also knew it was taking a toll on me and I needed help. But I had a very, very difficult time asking for help. So I hadn't cultivated many relationships where I actually could be vulnerable, felt like it was safe to be vulnerable. And I have since learned that I come from a long line of loved ones who, have probably dealt with the same thing.
Well, and you're totally not alone there. I think, that's something that a lot of us just don't learn growing up. And it's not really the fault of our parents because they weren't taught that either.
Yeah, I think that's true. One of the things that really was a relief coming to Calgary Counselling Centre and getting involved first individually in therapy and then also in some group sessions was that I was able to develop this structure around me of trusting relationships where I could regularly sort of reorient myself in the company of people who were exploring similar things and finding a place where, it's okay to realize, actually there are other people who are going through similar things and finding a little bit of hope, and where I maybe felt like it's okay to admit that this is getting away from me. I don't know exactly how to pull it back on my own. And in fact, that's actually, most of us don't know how to just pull it back on our own. And that's not that unusual.
Yeah, that's okay. It's a huge thing with mental health stuff is it feels so isolating.
Yes.
You feel like you're the only one thinking the way you do, the only one feeling the way you're feeling. And so I think that's a really good thing about the group programs. So before I worked at Calgary Counselling Centre, I was a client as well. And I participated in a group program. And that was one of the best parts about it for me is, realizing that a bunch of other people are going through the same stuff.
The sense of loneliness, the sense of lack. There's obviously, because I'm hyper self-critical, and it was not difficult for me to offer generosity of spirit to other people and then go home and be heavily self-critical.
Yeah.
And think that I was hiding that. But then I would present in a way other people could see I was unhappy. And they didn't know if I was unhappy with other people, but they knew I was unhappy with myself, and I knew I was unhappy with myself. And it just became more and more exhausting to carry this on. And the solution was not necessarily to find a better way to be more perfect. The solution was actually to find better tools to just bring out the stuff that was really going on and actually be honest about it and say, you know what? There's not necessarily even a cure for all of that stuff, but there are actually some effective ways of working with it and sorting it out, and maybe figuring out what's actually going on. And it's not necessarily even a blanket diagnosis of, sick. It's actually, there might be a few things that we can figure out. Maybe we can actually put a name on a few things that are happening, help you feel like it's not such an ominous thing that you have to carry, that, we can help you name some of that stuff, and we can help you find some tools that will help you work when you're out on your own. Come back and talk about it a little bit, share that with a few other people. They can say, here's what's working for me, and then find a little bit of hope in that.
For sure. So before you came in, what kinds of thoughts were you having? What were you feeling?
I would say it was not at all uncommon for me to tell myself that I was definitely half the man I should be. Most guys at my stage of life have already got this figured out and do not need help. Most people, like me, have got things together at this point, and if they can figure it out, why can't I? There's something pretty wrong with me. I felt pretty awful about that, and things got pretty dark.
That sounds like a lot of pressure.
It was awful. There were times I also knew, okay, it is going to get better. This is going to pass. I could tell myself, this is going to pass. I'm not always going to feel this way. But then I'd go up and down. And I knew that I needed some help to level off a little bit better so that I could figure out a way to actually enjoy being the person that I figured I probably was. Yeah. I figured there probably was a person that I was that I could enjoy being more often. If I could figure out a way to get that guy to just, that sounds like a silly way of putting it, but just appreciate
makes sense.
Just appreciate being who Brad is more often without being so hard on him.
I mean, that's excellent that you were able to recognize that. Okay, something's not quite right here. Let's try to figure this out and get some help. I think not enough people do that. I often would say to myself, if one of my daughters came to me, what would I say to her? Or one of my students even was sharing this with me. How would I speak to them? Couldn't I speak to myself the way that I would speak to one of them? And it entirely reorients my perspective. For sure.
Of course, I can offer generosity and love and warmth and acceptance and encouragement. And so how can I find a way to turn that around and offer that to myself? That's what I wanted. Yeah. Was to be able to do that for myself.
But you just didn't quite know how to get there?
I didn't know how to get there with any consistency. And not to be able to say, hey, Brad, everything's cool. Do whatever you want. Anything you want to do is fine with me, Brad. Yeah. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is to be able to give myself a reasonable amount of grace that I can offer to other people with consistency. Why can't I offer that to myself? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you find that process of initially reaching out for help? Like, was it?
Yeah. Pretty straightforward. Help is accessible, easy to be in touch with someone who can provide, the information that I needed. Yeah. Find somebody who was able to say, okay, I think sounds like here's what you're looking for. I think we can help you with that. And we can make it work with your circumstances and with the time constraints of your work and your family, and we can make this fit for you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that you worked on with your counselor?
A part of the work that we did focused on analyzing the kinds of things that I was talking to myself about when I was talking to myself, the kinds of circumstances that were bringing up the feelings that were most troublesome, and the kinds of patterns that were bringing up the feelings that were most problematic. And
so you've talked about your daughters. What other kind of support did you have with what you were going through and, through the counseling process?
I have a few close friends, and I have some family with whom I've been able to talk about some of the things that I'm exploring. It can be tricky because
right.
It's easier for me to speak openly, speak freely with the people that I know from my groups about the things that I'm experiencing. I am very, very thankful that people like my parents and my brother and some of my friends have been willing to listen to me talk about what I'm going through. And I have realized I'm a real internalizer. While I was trying to figure out what was going on for me and internalizing all of this stuff, I was probably actually robbing other people of an opportunity to help me that they would have been willing to offer. If I had been willing to reach out and ask for help, they probably would have helped me. Or at least they would have been willing to listen at least. Even if they had no insight to offer or no wisdom, they would at least have been willing to listen. And I didn't give them that opportunity because I was so convinced that it was important for me to project this image that I was okay. I was here to help other people. And that was my obligation, to help other people.
You touched on this a little bit, but as a man, was that even harder? I guess, you don't have anything else to compare it to, but is it hard to reach out? Is it like to talk about mental health? Do you find that is like a barrier?
I think I definitely grew up with this idea. Culturally, socially, I took on board this idea that it was definitely my job to be an achiever, a provider, to have things together, to be reliable, responsible, to be correct. Nature or nurture. I definitely carried this and then drilled this into myself. But I think I certainly looked at other men around me, and I definitely compared what was going on inside me to what I could see on the outside of them. And I never measured up, was how I saw it. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I learned along the way was to listen to stories and to identify rather than compare, and try and see ways in which I could identify with other things that people were going through, and stop comparing myself. And remember that everyone has their stuff, and most of it I can't see.
Yeah.
Everyone has their stuff.
Let's talk a bit about the group program. Do you remember the title of the group program?
I was involved in Taking Charge of Your Life. I was also involved in Building Esteem.
Oh, excellent. You did both. Yeah, what kinds of things did you work on in those group programs? What kinds of tools did you find beneficial?
One of the books that we looked at was I think it was called Breaking the Patterns of Depression, by a guy named Yapko, I think.
Yeah, Michael Yapko.
Mm-hmm. And really, really good introduction to understanding depression, which is something that I've been dealing with, and reorienting the way that I was thinking about depression, and understanding maybe that it was something that I wasn't necessarily trying to cure, but something to finding strategies to manage and to deal with. One of the things that I think that was really helpful about that for me was that I began to think of it rather than as this sort of this specter that's going to kind of always haunt me until I find some way to defeat it and clear it away. I began to think of it as it's simply this reality that I'm going to accept its presence, and I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to set it to the side. I'm going to work with it. I'm going to recognize what it does. I'm not going to be surprised when it's sending the messages that I know it sends. I'm going to just regard that as unsurprising, and then I'm going to let those go by when they come up, using whatever strategy I need to use at the time.
I can totally relate. It's like
I had this thought in my head, like I needed to conquer depression. And if I, do all these right things, that it'll just go away and that'll be the end of it. And so I would get hard on myself, like when, I'd have, these thoughts and feelings again that would come up. But it's like, that's not how it works. You learn and build up tools to manage it.
And reorienting the way that I thought about this helped me to say, okay, I don't have to just keep smacking against this wall. Actually, I can just stop fighting this exhausting fight. Actually, that's not what it's about. I'm going to just accept that's there. What am I going to learn from this and about this? What am I going to learn from this? It doesn't surprise me. I regard this as unsurprising when it sends up these messages. I'm just going to decide what to do with this. I'm not going to deny that it's there. I'm also not going to let it obscure everything else that I want to see about life, about what's going on in life. And I'm not going to let it dominate what I'm thinking right now. So fine. Okay, it's there. But it's also not the only thing I see. And it's also not the main thing I see. And there are various ways that I can think about that, tools that I can use.
For sure.
For me personally, I have really appreciated and really benefited from having a weekly appointment to gather with a group of relatively like-minded individuals. The details of our stories are not all the same, but many of the themes we bring to the table are the same. We share some of those things in common, and we also share in common this commitment to graciously accept one another's stories and welcome one another, to bring part of the struggle, share part of the struggle, hold it together, ask what's happening, and then share what's working and what's not working. And I heard this expression, which I really like, weaving the fabric of community. And it's not just community, because people find community all over the place, but it's focused, intentional, purposeful community, and also with generous and insightful professional input and guidance in that as well. Having that weekly appointment to do that, and then having that on my schedule weekly, it pulls
that accountability.
It provides some accountability. Yeah. It pulls me back in, gives me that weekly check-in, and then it begins to build a new pattern and make a new path.
I like how you said that it's not just a community.
Yeah.
I can't remember the word you used, but it was like intentional, and that having that focus of support and
intentional. Our facilitators weren't there necessarily they weren't there to talk at us. They were there to support and to help give helpful guidance, and also their insight. They didn't dominate the discussion, but they also were able to point out things that we would have missed, right?
Yeah.
I think their experience enables, having walked this path with a lot of people, enables them to see things and help us to see things that we can then have those aha moments, which then we, I hold on to those things, right? Then those become a part of my sort of collection of experiences that I can go back to and say, okay, yeah, I remember this. I know this for myself now.
That's a great way to look at it. Like the kind of the role of those counselors in the group room. What do you think is like one of the most valuable takeaways from counseling that you've had?
A challenge and some specific insights into a way to practice better self-compassion. I really think for me that is a very important piece that has been missing. I confess I still struggle with exercising self-compassion, and I'm beginning to. I'm smiling now, and I feel a little bit silly even about saying this, because I still struggle to look in a mirror and say something positive to myself. I recall a sketch from Saturday Night Live where there's a character who Stuart Smalley who says, "I'm good enough. I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me." And I just recall how funny that was. And I almost cannot take myself seriously when I say something positive to myself. I begin to mock myself almost. But at the same time, I recognize how deeply meaningful it is when I think about offering real affirmation to someone I really care about. one of my daughters or a student of mine who might really be struggling, and how deeply concerned I might be that they get this. I can say this, I can totally say this to them. Listen, I am way more interested in how we get through this together. And in fact, understanding what you do when you're not getting this and how you struggle through it tells me so much more about you as a learner and as a person who's growing than if you just got it right the first time every time.
Yeah.
So this is fine. This is just fine for you to grow. I want to turn that around and be able to say that to myself. Now that's nothing to mock. That is nothing to make light of. And yet I can't. For the life of me, Well,
that's like the whole process of self-compassion, right? Is,
yes.
I think that's what we should kind of all aim for, is not being perfect. It's kind of being okay with the fact that we're not. And you will still struggle with it sometimes. And
yes.
But no, I totally understand. Yeah, you've talked about this. Like it's so easy to think really kindly about people around us, but turning it on ourselves, like being hard on ourselves, feels just as easy, which is weird.
I feel like I'm doing something so noble when I criticize myself. Yeah. If I'm being hard on myself, good leaders expect the utmost from themselves.
Yeah. Where does it really get us? So Brad, how do you feel now? Like being willing to come in here and share your story, that must feel kind of empowering.
Yeah, I feel okay. I'll be honest. I feel like at times I do still struggle. There's never not going to be a time when difficulties do not come along.
For sure.
That's how it's
inevitable.
Yeah. That's how life's going to go. Mm-hmm. And so I'm definitely learning, and I'm definitely growing, and I'm definitely not where I wish I was. But I am working hard to get where I want to be. So.
Do you have any advice for someone thinking the way you thought and feeling the way you felt?
I think it's really important to recognize that everybody has their stuff. For people who are like me, who are feeling alone in it, taking a step to reach out probably feels very difficult. And once it's done, there can be so much relief in that. It can be so worth it.
Yeah, that first step. It's hard, but it's important.
Hard, but important. Because having had the experience myself, I understand it can initially be intimidating, but that taking the risk can be very rewarding. Mm-hmm. I understand what it's like to enter into a group and then break the ice and come to the realization that the other people in this group were feeling that way too. There is something about having that experience, coming through on the other side and going, I didn't know what I didn't know. And now that I do know, I actually wouldn't want to go back.
Right.
But the only way to get that is to be willing to step through onto the other side. And that can be scary.
Totally.
For sure. That can be scary. And there's no denying that's scary, but it's worth it. It's worth taking the risk.
Yeah, it's important to have that open mind and be willing to learn things you weren't aware of and to make change. And that's hard for everybody for sure. But
it's a safe way to do it.
Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Anything else about your story that you want people to know?
I feel like I should have something insightful to share.
You totally don't need to.
I do.
Yeah, no, you've given us so much. Okay. I want to thank you so much it's been such a delight chatting with you and hearing your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Both Jessie and Brad participated in the Building Esteem group program at Calgary Counselling Centre. I reached out to Annemarie Rued-Fraser, psychologist at Calgary Counselling Centre, to learn more about group counseling and the Building Esteem group program.
Group counseling is all about the dynamics happening between the various people in the group, whereas individual counseling is mainly about what's happening inside the one individual, as well as the supportive relationship between the client and the therapist.
Okay.
In group counseling, you have so many more interactions contributing to the dynamics, and the influence of the peer group becomes that much more important.
Yeah, how does that help someone having those other people around with a similar goal? How does that help the process?
What I've heard from clients who've completed groups with us has been that it's been so validating to hear people of their own age and other ages and backgrounds having this same experiences, the same lived experiences as them, that they're not alone, both in their emotional experience and in their general experience, and being able to hear from other people going through some of the same things, how to think about it differently, how to address it differently. It lands differently when it comes from someone living through the same thing as you,
right,
rather than a counselor.
Yeah. I don't know, sitting down with a counselor, I kind of put them on a pedestal. Like, they know more about this stuff than me. They're better than me.
But when you hear it differently.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And then it's not just about someone like a professional who can listen to you and hear you and provide you with some suggestions. It's about another person that is out there with you in the world at various times, and they have tried this and it worked for them, and now you can do the same thing.
Right. So in the Building Esteem program specifically, what kinds of issues or concerns are commonly addressed, and what would someone learn if they were in that group?
Mm-hmm. So it looks at understanding your concept of self. Are you still maintaining some of those negative ways of thinking that you might have internalized? How are your relationships? Doing a quick check-in on your relationships, and how are you communicating in them? Are they healthy? Do you have your roles understood? Additionally, do you have a healthy expectation of yourself and others, of your image, your body, your role in society? We'll look at how you're choosing to live your life. Are you living life in accordance with your personal values?
What are some of the benefits of participating in group counseling compared to just individual counseling?
You are getting a shared experience that is then mirrored back to you through your peers. You get to learn from them vicariously rather than just from your own personal experience. You get feedback, immediate feedback from them. It also becomes a stage upon which to practice some of the skills that you're learning before using them in the real world.
Right.
In a way that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in individual counseling.
Yeah.
It's a much safer context in which to do that.
I've run into that in, my own counseling, where it's like, okay, well, this is something you could do, go out and practice it. It's like, ooh, I don't know exactly who I can do that with. I would get it. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, Annemarie, I would assume that with any organization that offers group counseling, it's going to look a little different. But typically with Calgary Counselling Centre, how many people are in a group program?
We will go ahead with running a scheduled group when there are a minimum of 7 people registered. And the maximum is 14. Once we get to 14, it becomes really difficult to manage all of those relationships.
Right. Okay. And so I know that that's one of our prerequisites for group, is that someone has to have, a few individual counseling sessions first. Why is that?
It's so that we can assess what some of the priority issues might be collaboratively. The client will speak with the therapist collaboratively to determine, are we appropriate to move into group? Is this the right group for your specific needs? Or do we need to work on this individually first and then move you into group?
Okay.
And sometimes it does require that sit-down conversation with somebody because we might have a blind spot. Other times it might be, oh yeah, good to go. Carry on.
Yeah.
We do want to ensure, however, that a person isn't in a high, significant level of distress, because that is not going to work in their favor. They're going to have more difficulty potentially attending a weekly group over the course of 14
Committing to
weeks.
That. Yeah.
Right. It's still a commitment over the course of 14 weeks. We also need to determine what is going to be a manageable fee for them to attend the group, because our group fee is managed on a sliding scale as well.
Excellent. Yeah. Annemarie, how do we, how do we, quote unquote, Calgary Counseling Center, how do we measure progress or success in group counseling?
Just like individuals coming in for therapy and counseling complete their vital signs prior to every session, they still do that when they're attending group sessions.
Okay.
And so the scores from the first session of group right to the end of group are compared to determine has group actually helped. And for the group purposes themselves, there's usually a group of questionnaires that people are asked to complete so that we can compare their score pre-group and post-group.
Okay, so not just the outcome questionnaire.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, we do know that research has absolutely shown that positive gains achieved in individual counseling are maintained more consistently and for longer when people attend group after having finished individual treatment. And so the group aspect of treatment is extremely beneficial, and one might even say necessary if you wish to maintain the positive gains that you've made in your individual counseling.
Right. Yeah, I could see it really just solidifying those lessons, and you kind of reinforce that idea of commitment. And that it's just one more area where it's like, okay, you got to come every week. That really solidifies kind of that habit forming,
and the accountability.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yay.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I have been a mother for like the past 10 years, which, does a lot for myself. I have to dedicate a lot of my time to my children. So it's really important to me to have a good relationship with myself, I'll say, in the sense of I have been a single mom. And so therefore I don't really get time to really work on myself as much as my kids.
For sure.
Yeah.
So Jessie, where are you from? What do you do?
I'm from Grand Prairie, and the thing I do is I am a stay-at-home mom. So I do I pretty much just take my time and raise my kids right now. I recently did just have a baby as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
That keeps you busy.
So, yeah, it keeps me very busy. And at the same time to focus on the well-being of myself and my mental health, and just, a healthier way that people should react or, communicate, and just have the relationship with themselves is very important, because this is something that I'll be teaching my children as well.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a very important lesson. So how did you find out about us?
Through Victim Services, they offered me a funding for my well-being.
Okay.
And through that funding, I asked them if there was any way that I could find counseling in the sense of just, making sure I'm doing bettering myself. And they pointed me in the direction of Calgary Counseling. And I talked to a counselor for a while, and I told them that I would like to be a part of a group. I think it's so beneficial to talk to the people that are going through the same thing or that want to do the same kind of bettering as you do.
Of course. Yeah.
So group is so beneficial in that way, in the sense of when you go to group, you usually find like-minded people. And therefore, when you do a group with people that also want to better themselves, you learn so much because of the other aspects and the other perspectives.
For sure. So what were you going through that led you to want to improve your mental health?
At the time, when I was with Victim Services and they approached me with this, there was a domestic dispute, and there was, just a partnership thing where my partner and me were, we were fighting and stuff. And at the same time, I have had abuse since I was a child, and I give people the benefit of the doubt instead of letting myself have those boundaries and have my self-esteem. I wanted to learn how to keep my self-worth to me, when someone does shame me or someone does put me down, I don't take it so personally.
Right. Yeah, that sounds like a bit of a hard time, and that would cause a lot of stress.
Yeah, my stress was up for sure. And the program was so understanding of it. Taught me a lot about myself in the sense of how society affects you, how just your own brain affects you, how your family affects you, and how your partner affects you. And, like when you think about your mental health, you really do have to take the world in around you in the sense of that, because it affects you and you don't even know. Your mind is in you. So you really do control what should affect you, but the outside world affects you so much.
Yeah. How was your life being affected by, by what you were going through and the feelings you were having?
My self-talk was not the best, I'll say. And I took whatever my outside world said to me, and I did take it to heart, or I did put it in an important place that it was like, the world thinks this about me. My partner thinks this about me. I should probably fix this.
Did you have any ideas about what counseling would be like before you came in?
No, not really. I've never really took counseling before. This felt like a no judge zone in the sense of, I wanted to be there, and it was very more like growing with me, I'll say. Like the process, the group seemed to want you to grow.
Of course.
And it helps me grow so much in that sense that the outlook was like, we want you to do better. We want you to excel. And,
You felt like you were encouraged to make progress?
Yes, that's exactly it. And the thing is the people in that group as well had that kind of energy. Like, we want to make progress. So it was very beneficial in that sense that not only were the teachers wanting you to have progress, but all the people around you in the group also, because they were there because they wanted to be there. Yeah. They also wanted you to have progress, to do good, and it just felt so good. Like, it's definitely going to stick with me. Everyone was like, hey, we're doing this to better ourselves. No shame. We might feel down on ourselves once in a while. We might have done the wrong things once in a while, but we are trying to better ourselves. And since everyone was participating, had that kind of energy, it was very beneficial, I'll say.
Yeah, that's a great mindset. Did you saw a counselor one-on-one before joining group, right?
Yes, I did.
How were those sessions?
They were great. My counselor was a great listener. Every time I talked to him, I never feel like he's biased. I never feel like he's judging me, which is great. He asked so many questions about me personally, not like prying or stepping over my toes, but he was very thoughtful with his questions, as well as like he took the time to actually understand, which was really nice. Like, it helps me understand myself too, right?
You came in like knowing right away that you wanted to participate in a group program?
I didn't know that there were group programs, to be honest.
Okay.
I thought that there was going to, I didn't know what there was to really be provided to me, because I live in Grant Perry and it is in Calgary. So there's that kind of distance thing that maybe I would have to live in Calgary to be able to participate or whatnot, right? As we continue talking, my counselor and me, I do believe he realized that I wanted that. Like, I wanted something that had people like me, that were people that just wanted to better themselves.
Yeah.
People are feeling the same way as me, but they give you different perspectives. They give you different lessons. They have different stories altogether that, like, when you have a group and you can relate to the people that are also in it, it helps you learn a lot.
Totally. Before I started working at Calgary Counseling Center, I took a group program as well. Yeah. And everyone has a different story and is going through different things, but you put yourself in a group like that and you just feel so much less alone.
Right. And that was the idea for me. It's like, I was like, if I'm in group and I talk about these things, maybe I won't feel so alone. And it works out like that for everyone in the group kind of deal, right? So everyone kind of just proceeds to do better because they know they're not alone, right?
Right. So what are the kinds of things that you worked on with your counselor or the kinds of skills that you learned in group that have helped you?
Well, okay, the group that I took was about self-esteem. So one of the core things were your value, like your self-value, like how you see yourself in the world, setting your boundaries, knowing your self-worth. Things that we learned were how to communicate to someone when they are being kind of, they're demeaning you, right? How to take it in the sense of like, is this really important or is this just the other person? Knowing who you are is a really important thing in that sense of like self-worth, and knowing what you want to do as well. Like, in order to, not have incidents like that, or and how you can react and approach it in the right light so that that you're not devaluing yourself, I'll say.
Yeah. Those really resonated with you?
They really did. I do have a childhood of abuse in a sense. So my self-worth is like all over the place. When abuse happens in a family, you question your self-worth. So my self-worth is not like as sturdy as it should be. But like after the group, I feel like, like I'm more sturdy in it, especially since you talk to people with experiences kind of like yours.
Right.
But, there was a lot that we learned, to be honest. I'm sure everyone took it differently. We learned about how society tells us we should look and sound a certain way, right? And perfection is not something that's achievable. And you can do better. You can always do better and better, but you'll never do things perfectly, right?
Yeah.
And like never and always are things in conversations. Like when someone says, you never do this or you always do this, those aren't realistic, right?
Yeah.
So just like little things like that and big things like that, like, because society is such a big thing and the way that you talk to yourself is inside of you, right? But I learned a lot from the group. Like it was so beneficial. It's definitely going to stick with me. I'm going to keep it close for as long as I can, for sure. And to be honest, it just helps me with my kids. The kids, if I have good self-esteem and I teach them like to have good self-esteem or to have good self-worth and care about themselves, more than what people have to say about them and be kind to people, it just helps me out in raising good people.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's something that people don't really realize is that working on improving your mental health, it not only helps you, it helps your relationships with the people around you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That's another reason why I wanted to do the counseling and do the group is because I have kids. And so I'm dealing with people every day. They're just little people and little people love to test you, right? So the fact that I have these little people that like to test me, not as much as adults do, right? Like they don't have the extremes as adults. It puts my foot in a better direction towards teaching them about, emotions, self-esteem, boundaries, and all those things. And it was so beneficial.
Yeah. And those are such important things to learn early on.
Very true. That's so true. Yeah.
So what about working with your individual counselor? Anything that you're working on that really helped you?
My counselor would give me little tips. When you're going through something, you always ask yourself why. And like sometimes there is no why. Like you cannot control people, right? Because sometimes I'd be like, why is this person doing this? And and he would say, there is no why. Like, this is what that person is doing, right? That's the thing about it is like, you can't approach it on why they're doing it. They're doing it. And you just have to figure out a way of either like, do I want that in my life? Can we change this? Right. And if this continues to persist, to find a solution in myself, to make myself feel safe, right? Because usually if there is a why, it's something that's uneasy, something you're fearing, something that you don't want happening, right? He pretty much taught me that my life is up to me. Like when someone gets mad at me, it's whether I want to take that in or not, or be like, that's that's on you. Right. Because when people get mad at me, I tend to take it on.
Oh,
I do. Right?
I know what you mean. Yeah. It's hard not to personalize that.
I feel like he made it more robust that I don't take on people's, like he gave me simple little things like that. Like he's like, there's no why. It just is. You don't ask yourself why. You don't control people. You control yourself.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to lie. When the first time I went to my counselor, I was very stressed. Like we did a little stress test thing and he said I was way above the stress level.
Right.
But you know what? Like 2-3 weeks of talking to him, my stress went down so much. Like it really did.
Yeah. That questionnaire that you fill out every time.
Yes.
What did you think of that? Did you find that helpful?
I did. I noticed the questions are the same every week, but I noticed every week my answers would change a little, right? Like, wow, this week I feel like this and that week I felt like this, but they're the same questions. So things can change in a week about your feelings and stuff, right?
Yeah.
And it was very beneficial to answer those questions. And they were the same questions every week over and over just to see how I felt personally about things.
And that kind of shows that it's all fluid, right? And like you said, things can change so that that can instill some hope, hey?
Yeah. Yeah, right. And the thing is like, even though you're stressed, it's not the end of the world. You have to work on it. Like if your stress level is high, you have to figure out where you might have to let things go, where you need to pick things up more and stuff.
What is it like in your community? I mean, I know how things are in Calgary, but like, is mental health something that's talked about in Grand Prairie? Like, is it?
I've lived in Grand Prairie for 4 years. People care about it, but it really isn't something that is taken as importance.
Yeah.
In a sense. It really depends who you talk to in that sense, right?
For sure. Yeah.
At the same time, I always take it seriously. That like, if someone's not giving me what I think is needed, I will go look elsewhere in that sense, right? Or I will try to find the best resource I can to feel welcome, to feel like I'm getting what I need.
So how do you feel now?
The fact that I could share my experiences and my stories with the group and just have everyone listen and be supportive, it lets me release things that were bothering me. And it also makes me feel like it's okay. You know, like it was okay that you had these experiences. You're working on to better yourself now. And that's so good for you. Like they were very encouraging. They never ever took my story and was like, well, you know what, you should have done this and this differently. Cause you know, you can't change the past, but
no, for sure.
They were very welcoming and supportive. And as well as they pretty much just said, I am here for you. Right. And the fact that they said they gave me this feeling of I am there for you was so healing as well.
Amazing. What are some of the things you learned that you still incorporate day to day?
I would say the self-talk is definitely something that I've incorporated in the sense of like, cause you know, everyone has a moment where they're like, oh, I could have done better.
Yeah.
So when I have those moments of I could have done better, I add to that, like, well, I did the best I could right now. Right.
Yeah.
So even if I have like a little bit of negative talk, I always try to add a spin to it. And it's helped tremendously in just my self-worth and the way that I see myself.
Yeah. And catching those in the moment, those times that you're negative and switching it. Eventually it gets easier and more automatic. Yeah.
And it's definitely, and that was something we talked to in the class as well. It's like, you might do this one day and the next day you might be like, oh, this is this is dumb. Like, don't do this. But if you keep it up, if you keep doing it, eventually the practice makes better and it's not work at all. Right. And that was the thing too, is like the classes were, I don't know how many, it was a couple months too. It was so nice to look forward to going to it every week. I mean, there was almost a dread sometimes, like, oh, I got class this week, or I have this group this week. I don't know what I'm going to do. But like every time you actually went, it was so beneficial. Like after you did the class, you felt so good. But I would say, the self-talk was really good. And in our group, actually, in the beginning, we were said to set SMART goals. And the SMART goal was something that was achievable, something that you needed, like you should do for yourself in the sense of growing. And the self goal, since we had the self goal from the beginning to the end, it was always incorporated in the program. So you kind of had to do the practice, right? Like you had to.
Yeah, you got to do the work.
Yeah, which was really beneficial too. I feel like the SMART goal that they had incorporated into the group was such a smart idea because you did it for the whole group. And then at the end of the group, they said, so how's your SMART goal going? Just for the fact that you were focused, like you had that SMART goal for the whole group, it kind of just is something that you had to practice. And so it just stays with you, right?
Yeah. And it gives you that accountability. Like, as well, you have to talk about it with this group of people. So it kind of keeps you in check.
Right. Yeah. And to be honest, by the time group was done, everyone was pretty much like, I'm keeping my self goal, right? Like at the end of group, everyone's like, I'm going to keep working on this. And it's so good to see that too, right? Like that people are like, this was so beneficial. I'm going to keep doing this.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for someone who might be in a similar situation as you?
I would say if anyone was in a similar situation to me or like, worried about their mental health and wanted to work on themselves, like group is such a great thing. When you get into a group of people, especially a group of people where, they're just living their lives and they're just trying to do better, they give such a perspective to you. And they also teach you, like, I must say, I got a lot of things off of the people in my group. And how they approach situations and how they found solutions to situations. It was nice to hear that people with, regular jobs and regular lives also have struggles like you. And they also are trying to find solutions to their struggles. Like, like it's not just you. You're not alone. And
no, for sure.
in your life is going to push you down, right? Because sometimes when you're trying to better yourself, you have someone there trying to tell you this is not worth it, right? It's nice to have a counselor that will lift you up, but as a person of like, you know that counselor is there to push you up, right? You know that's what the counselor is going to do, but to have a group of people push you up it's just such a different feeling. It feels so good.
It's so great to hear that you had a good experience.
I really did.
Sorry, was there anything else that you wanted me to ask? Anything else about your story you want people to know?
I just want, like, if someone is having mental issues or something, reach out, see what you have available around you, because it is so important to keep your mental health in a good place.
You've been listening to Living Fully. Thanks for tuning in. This episode was produced by Nick here, Louisa Campos, Jenna Forbes, and by me, Katherine Hurtig. A special thanks to Brad, Jessie, and Annemarie Rued-Fraser. To stay up to date on our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe. We're available in your favorite podcast app. Living Fully is a production of Calgary Counselling Centre and recorded in Calgary on Treaty 7 territory. Living Fully podcast is not a substitute or alternative for professional care or treatment. Calgary Counselling Centre and Counselling Alberta provide effective counselling for anyone in Alberta with no waitlist and no financial barriers. Find us online at calgarycounseling.com or counselingalberta.com. For help across Canada and the United States, call 211. If you are outside of Canada and the US, seek help from your general medical practitioner.